hadn't even unpacked the last box when the knock came. Not a friendly welcome to the neighborhood knock. No, this one was hard, hollow, entitled, "The kind of knock that demands, not invites." My boots were still muddy from the dock, and my hands were wrapped around a warm mug of coffee, finally settling into my dream lakefront home, one I'd worked decades to afford. But the moment I opened the door, my peace shattered. 3 people stood outside. Matching clipboards, matching frowns, matching smugness. The woman in the Centera woman whose lipstick was lined like war paint stepped forward like she owned the air between us. "HOA," she said sharply. No greeting, no name, just an acronym, like a badge. "Can I help you?" I asked, my voice calm but confused. She flipped open the clipboard like she was about to read me my rights. "We're here to notify you that this body of water," she gestured toward the lake behind me, "belongs under HOA protection, and you are currently in violation of Dock Ordinance 7C. I blinked. "Wait, my dock." "Yes," she said, "and the lake. You don't have clearance. You need a permit from us to use or make any modifications. Failure to comply may result in removal of property." I looked behind me at the dock. I'd just walked on one-eyed, repaired myself with sweat and bruises the week before. And then back at her. I couldn't help but smile. Not a happy smile, more like the kind you give when someone completely misunderstands the gravity of the situation. "That's interesting," I said. "Because this dock, this lake, they're mine." They exchanged a look, then laughed. She stepped closer. "Sir, you must be confused. This entire neighborhood is under regulation by the Maple Hollow HOA, and we have full jurisdiction over all common use facilities, including I own the lake," I said. Dead silence. It didn't register at first. Her expression faltered, but the arrogance didn't drop yet. She opened her mouth again, ready to recite more rules. "I'm not confused. I purchased this property, and the deed includes full water rights. The lake, the bottom, the docks. It's private property, mine. Your HOA doesn't own any part of it, in fact." I walked back into the house and returned with a rolled copy of the official survey. I unfurled it on my porch table, letting the wind reveal the truth. "This document says I not only own the lake, but your HOA's boat dock. It sits smack in the middle of my parcel. Your people are trespassing." Now that got her attention. The silence that followed wasn't just awkward, it was venomous. And just like that, she snapped the clipboard shut. "We'll be verifying this with the board. Don't make any changes until you hear from us." "Of course," I said, nodding politely. "You do that?" They walked away without another word. But the way the woman looked back over her shoulder, it wasn't curiosity, it was challenge. They weren't done with me, and I wasn't done with them either. 3 days earlier, I'd stood in front of the real estate agent, my hands trembling slightly as I held the keys. She called it a fixer-upper, but I saw something different. A new beginning. After years working undercover in federal property enforcement, I'd seen everything from corporate land theft to HOA corruption, buried under false bylaws, so when this cabin came up for auction sitting on 11 acres of untouched Lakeside, with full riparian rights, I moved fast. The strange thing? No one else bid? I asked the auctioneer why. His answer: HOA politics. Whole neighborhood thinks they own it already. That lake was supposed to be community-owned, but the developer never followed through before bankruptcy. You're buying more than just a view. You're walking into a fight. Mind, I'd spent years cleaning up messes like this for the government. I could handle one HOA. What I didn't expect was how fast they'd come at me, not with legal paperwork, not even a formal complaint, but power plays, aggression, noise complaints that made no sense. A fake violation sticker on my truck window that magically disappeared before I could photograph it. Someone even dumped pine needles at the end of my driveway. Subtle messages, psychological warfare, but I wasn't afraid. What they didn't know was they picked the wrong person. 2 nights after the dock incident, I woke up to a strange light coming from the lake. It was 2:17 a.m. I slipped out quietly, moved toward the shoreline. 3 figures were standing on the HOA dock. Flashlights, one of them carried a toolbox. I stayed behind the trees and recorded everything. We were trying to install a new signpost. Private HOA dock, members only. I almost laughed. Almost. But this wasn't funny. This was trespassing. I waited until they left. Then, in the quietest hour before dawn, I paddled out myself, unscrewed the post, and took it inside. And the next morning, I mailed it along with a copy of the deed and a letter from my attorney. To the HOA board, no reply, but I knew that silence. I'd seen it before in federal disputes. The kind of silence that comes right before they double down. A week later, my neighbor Lisa stopped by, middle-aged, honest eyes, or a cardigan-like armor. "I shouldn't be here," she whispered. "They'll see me." "Who?" I asked, even though I already knew. "The board, they watch everything." She told me that after the original developer went bankrupt, the HOA moved in like vultures. Told residents they were forming a rescue committee to maintain shared property. But over time, they rewrote bylaws, took over dock access, banned fishing unless fees were paid, and claimed the lake as their own, but it never was theirs, she said. "We just didn't know who owned it until now." I offered her tea. She refused. "Too nervous. They'll come for you harder," she said, standing to leave. "They won't stop at letters." And she was right, because the next week, my dock was vandalized. 3 of the support beams were sawed halfway through. It didn't collapse, but it creaked violently when I stepped on it. That's when it turned from annoying to dangerous. I filed a report with the sheriff's office. Quietly, carefully. I didn't want to escalate it yet. Instead, I set up motion-activated cameras, hidden ones, and I started documenting everything. Every time someone walked too close to my cabin, every time a drone hovered overhead, every time a truck parked at the end of my driveway just to look, I was building a case, not just for trespassing. For harassment, for intimidation, for organized abuse of power. Because when I said I wasn't afraid, I meant it. But what I hadn't told them yet was that I used to prosecute people like them. I wasn't just some retiree with a dream. I was a federal enforcer of land use violations, and they were about to walk straight into my web. Stay with me till the end, because the next chapter will show you exactly how far the HOA was willing to go. And what they tried to do just to silence me will shake you. But what they didn't realize is who they were messing with. Make sure you watch till the very end, because justice, it's coming, and trust me, you'll want to see how I made them pay on their own dock. 2 weeks after the vandalism to my dock, the HOA finally made their next move, but it wasn't a meeting or a phone call, or even a legal notice. It was a parade. On a crisp Saturday morning, I woke up to music, banners, and about a dozen HOA members dressed in red polos and khakis, gathering near the boat ramp on my side of the lake. I watched from the porch with a quiet intensity, as they set up a pop-up tent with a folding table, a clipboard, a cooler of drinks, and most importantly, giant sign that read, "Maple Hollow HOA, Family Day, Community Lake Access for All." They weren't just denying my ownership. They were pretending I didn't exist. People started showing up in golf carts and SUVs, kids, dogs, coolers, folding chairs. I could smell grilled hot dogs drifting through the trees. Laughter echoed across the lake. And right there, in full daylight, they were walking across my dock like it was a sidewalk. I didn't interrupt. Not yet. Instead, I documented. I filmed the crowd. The signs, the people, the conversations I could pick up on my directional mic. A man wearing aviator sunglasses and a tactical-looking vest someone I'd never seen before was standing next to the HOA president. He wasn't laughing. Odd, he was surveying, watching, controlling the crowd flow, the enforcer. I recognized his posture instantly. It's not military. Not police, private, security. That's when it hit me. They weren't just pushing boundaries. They were preparing for a standoff. I turned off the camera and went back inside. where an envelope from the county recorder's office sat unopened on my kitchen counter. I opened it slowly. Inside was the certified parcel map I'd requested. Highlighted in green was the entire lake. Wrapped in a single property ID number, my name, everything. They were standing on my land. And yet none of that would matter if they convinced the community otherwise. Because in HOA wars, perception is power, and they were winning it. 3 years ago, in a dusty courtroom 2 counties over, I sat across from a man who claimed he owned a public park. He'd falsified documents, intimidated neighbors, even hired private guards to patrol. His defense. They let me do it, so it must be mine. The judge ruled against him. I remember what he said as he was escorted out. Truth doesn't matter if no one stands up for it. I never forgot that, and that's when I realized I couldn't wait for a courtroom. I needed to fight them where they were strongest in their own neighborhood. The next morning, I printed 20 copies of the parcel deed, 20 copies of the survey, map, and 20 photos showing their community day, taking place on land that was legally mine. Then I added one more sheet to the paquita. Handwritten note that read, "If your family slipped on my dock yesterday, I could sue you, but I won't. Just stop pretending you own what you don't." I walked the entire neighborhood on foot, placing one envelope on each doorstep by noon. The HOA president was at my door again. She wasn't alone this time. A man in a gray suit stood behind her. No clipboard, just a briefcase. She tried to open. "With civility, you're creating confusion. People are upset." I didn't answer. The man spoke instead. "I'm from the HOA's legal committee. We believe you're misinterpreting the land boundary. Our engineers are looking into historical easements." I raised an eyebrow. "You mean the developer's documents from 18 years ago that were never filed with the county? Those easements." He blinked. That was the first crack. I stepped forward. "You want a legal fight over a lake you've never owned and can't afford to maintain? Be my guest. 8. Just make sure your board is ready to lose your dock. And your insurance." Her jaw clenched, but she didn't speak. Instead, they left again, this time without a single threat. For a few days, things went quiet. Too quiet, but I've worked enough stings to know. Silence means they're regrouping. So I started talking to people, not the board, not the enforcers. The ones they ignored, like old Mr. Redding, who lived by the southern edge of the lake. Widower, lived in that house for 40 years. When I told him about the dock dispute, he just shook his head. "You know," he said, "they used to let us fish off that dock. Then one day they put up a gate, said it was for liability reasons. But that lake was never theirs. I remember when it was up for sale, they just claimed it." I asked him if he'd ever seen the real documents. Never. Just newsletters. Another neighbor, Tara, said her family stopped going near the lake because of the HOA surveillance. Drones, cameras, and random warnings about unregistered guests. She was stunned to hear the HOA didn't own the lake at all. And that's when something changed. People started talking, whispering the illusion was breaking. But the HOA wasn't done yet. Because a few nights later, I found the gate to my dock chained shut, a fresh padlock, bolted metal sign. "Under HOA restriction, violators will be fined." I stood there for a long time, holding the chain in my hand. Cold steel, sharp edges, a very, very bad idea. They'd crossed the line from fake authority to criminal behavior, so I called the sheriff. He came the next morning. Didn't even knock, just walked with me down to the dock. When he saw the chain, he sighed. Maple Hollow again. He muttered, "You've dealt with them before?" He nodded. "They've tried similar things on other parcels. Most people back down. Can't afford the legal fight." I handed him my deed. He scanned it, looked back at the lake, then back. "At the lock? You want me to file a report?" "No," I said. "Want you to watch." And I pulled out bolt cutters, snapped the chain in half, tossed it into a trash bag. The sheriff nodded. "Keep documenting. This'll get worse before it gets better." The following week, I hired a land use attorney not to sue yet, but to send a formal cease and desist to the HOA. It was a simple letter, but it hit like a sledgehammer. The message was clear. Any further claim use or obstruction of parcel number 116L, including the lake, dock, and shoreline, will result in legal action. You are hereby notified to cease all activities related to or upon said property. They received the letter. They didn't respond. But the next day, the HOA's community Facebook group lit up. Not public posts, just leaked screenshots, sent to me anonymously. One read, "He's threatening us with lawyers. We need to stand together, or he'll take everything." Another, "He's lying. That lake always belonged to the community. He just forged something. And then, we should build a new dock on the far side. That'll show him." I sat in my chair, scrolling through the messages. Sipping coffee, they still didn't understand. They weren't dealing with a neighbor. They were dealing with a man who used to shut down criminal land scams for a living, and they were walking themselves straight into the kind of case I used to build files on. Their paranoia. It was evidence. Their fake signs? Evidence. The lock. The event. The community gaslighting. All evidence, and I had something else to do my trump card. Because while they were busy arguing about their imaginary rights, I had quietly filed an injunction. Request with the county backed by the deed, the surveys. And over 30 documented incidents of trespass and vandalism. It was pending, and when it cleared, they wouldn't just lose access, they'd be legally banned from even touching the water forever. The first time I saw the flyer, it was taped to the back window of the local bakery. I almost missed it wedged between a kid's piano recital poster and a lost cat notice, but the bold headline stopped me cold. Warning: rogue resident threatens. Community access to historic lake below it. A blurry photo of my cabin, my dock, and me standing in the background, coffee in hand, barely in focus. I tore it down, folded it, stared at it in disbelief. At the bottom, in smaller print, paid for by the Maple Hollow Preservation Committee. They were trying to paint me as a villain, not just a nuisance, a threat, and worse. They were organizing that same day. I spotted signs being staked into front yards. Save our lake. Keep public access public. Stop the outsider. But I wasn't an outsider. I was the owner. Later that evening, I stopped by Redding's house to check on him. He didn't answer. I waited. Just as I turned to leave, the door creaked open. He looked ... different. Pale, tired. I saw the flyer, he muttered. They came by yesterday. Asked me to sign some petition. Did you? He shook his head. I told them the truth, that you own the lake, that they're lying. Good, I said. He looked away. He said if I didn't sign, I'd lose. My dock privileges too, that they'd find me again. My stomach turned. They threatened you. Not in so many words, but they don't need to. Round here, the HOA is judge, jury, and executioner. They control the trash pickup, road maintenance, even who gets mailbox repairs. If you cross them, you disappear. 2 days later, the petition showed up at my door. A teenage boy, maybe 15, approached me on a bike and handed it over like he was delivering a curse. HOA asked me to bring this to you, he mumbled. I opened it. Dozens of signatures, typed names, home addresses, lot numbers, and at the top, bolded and underlined, request to relinquish lake ownership for public good. It was laughable. No legal foundation. Just bluster. But something about it made my jaw clench. One signature in particular. Lisa McGregor, my first ally. The woman who'd warned me. I stared at her name, thought about the tea she never drank, the cardigan. The fear, why would she sign this? Unless they forced her hand. I showed up at her doorstep that evening, she answered slowly. Eyes darting around like she expected someone to be watching. I didn't want to sign it, she said, before I could even ask. They told me my husband's old workshop was out of code, that they'd report it to the county if I didn't cooperate. And you believed them? She bit her lip. It wasn't about belief, it was survival. I didn't respond. I just nodded. It wasn't her fault. Fear makes people fold. But inside me, something snapped. This wasn't about a dock anymore. This was about control, manipulation, abuse of power disguised as policy. That night, I went back to my storage shed, pulled out the black case I hadn't opened in years. Inside a dusty laptop, a badge, and a binder marked HOA Oversight, Federal Investigations Archive. I pulled up old files, case numbers, precedents. The Maple Hollow HOA wasn't the first to do this. There were patterns, same scare tactics, same language, same methods. Most went unpunished. Some got sued into the ground. But what made this one different was me. They didn't know I had access to the HOA's original developer agreement, the one buried in the county archives. It's the one that confirmed in legal ink that the developer never transferred lake rights to the HOA. And the kicker? In the board's 2011 annual meeting, minutes publicly filed, they referenced the pending lake transfer. It's an unresolved issue. It was all there. Proof they knew they didn't own it. Proof they lied. 3 days later, I mailed an official fraud report to the state HOA regulatory office for binders. It's labeled, indexed, photographs, signage logs, testimonies from residents. But I didn't stop there, because something bigger was happening. That same week, someone broke into my cabin. They didn't take anything, didn't smash a window, yet they moved things. The drawer with my camera SD cards? Open. Rifled through the envelope with the deed copy. Gone, whoever it was. Wanted information. And they didn't care about being subtle. I checked the camera. Nothing. The hidden cams were disabled. Wires clipped. Deliberate. Professional. This wasn't some teenager playing pranks. This was surgical. The next day. A white SUV parked on the road outside my property, sat there for an hour, and left. It returned at 3 a.m. and again at dawn. No. Plates, just tinted windows. I took photos, documented, filed a report with the sheriff again, but I knew what this was. Intimidation. This was the HOA's final playbook. Psychological pressure. They were hoping I'd pack up, sell, leave. But I'd lived through worse. When you've stood face to face with corrupt land barons laundering money through native land trusts, a scared suburban HOA president is just background noise. Then came the anonymous email. No subject, no sender info. It's just a burner address. It read, "If you go forward with your complaint, we'll release everything. The photos, the documents, your past." And attached 3 photos of me. One from my days undercover, one from a protest I infiltrated, and one from a courtroom hallway. Years ago, badge barely visible. Someone had dug deep. Someone knew who I was, and they were ready to expose it. Not because I'd done anything wrong, but because it would raise questions. Why is a federal enforcer living quietly in a lake cabin? Why didn't he tell the neighbors? What's he hiding? All it would take was doubt, and they'd win the court of public opinion again, but they'd made a mistake. They forgot what else I had access to. I had contacts, old ones. One phone call. And I had a records request filed for the HOA presidents. Personal tax lien. Another revealed that their treasurer had filed bankruptcy twice, both times, while still holding HOA office. Violation of their own bylaws. The cracks were getting wider, and I wasn't pushing yet. I was just watching them crumble at the next HOA board meeting. Held at the local community center, I walked in unannounced. Dozens of residents turned to stare. Some knew who I was. Some only knew the lies. The president tried to block me at the door. "This is a private meeting." "Not when it involves fraud," I said, pulling out a stack of printouts. "Sir, you're not on the speaking list. Doesn't matter." I brought my own list, and I laid down 3 things. Certified deed ownership of the lake. Violations backed by sheriff reports. Evidence of coordinated misinformation against me. The room was silent. One man at the back clapped. Then another. Someone said, "Wait, is that true?" And then the panic began. The president called for a recess. I walked out before they could. And for the first time, the HOA was on defense, not offense. It was raining on the day the injunction cleared. Not a drizzle, not a spring shower. A full-on, thunder-rolling, earth-shaking storm. fitting because everything was about to break. I stood on my porch, staring out at the lake. My lake as sheets of water slid off the roof. The dock trembled beneath the weight of wind and water, but it stood strong. It's the same way I had. The envelope in my hand was thick, embossed with the county seal. Inside, Order of Injunction, Maple Hollow Homeowners Association v. My name denied. Counter-injunction approved. Effective immediately, the HOA was forbidden to install signage on or near my lake, use or claim any section of my shoreline, host events, enter or authorize dock access without express permission, circulate materials misrepresenting property ownership. Violations would result in fines up to $10,000 per incident and possible criminal charges. That was the first blow. The second came an hour later. A sheriff's cruiser rolled up the gravel path. Out stepped Deputy Hargrove, the same one who'd warned me back when the chain was first found on my dock. He handed me a folder. "County is opening a case," he said, "based on your files: vandalism, trespass, harassment, unlicensed security operations. The HOA president and treasurer are both under investigation." "Understood," I said quietly. "You sure you want to keep living here?" he asked. "'Cause things are going to get ugly. I didn't come here for peace," I said. "I came here for the truth, and now it's out." But it wasn't over yet, because when tyrants fall, they don't fall quietly. The HOA responded exactly how I expected, with denial, spin, and desperation. The president, now under investigation, posted a rambling, open letter to the community Facebook group, blaming out of control, legal interference, and a government informant who's poisoning our neighborhood values. They called me a spy, an infiltrator said. I moved here to destroy them from within. Some believed it, most didn't, because while she ranted, I quietly posted the entire legal packet: deeds, surveys, photographic evidence, court responses. A public Google Drive. Unedited, transparent, one post. Here's everything. No lies, no spin. Just the truth. Right. Decide for yourself. Within hours, the HOA's page was flooded with comments, and not the kind they expected, Lisa wrote. I signed the petition under pressure. He told the truth from day one. Redding posted, "They threatened me over a fishing license." "What kind of neighbor does that?" Tara added. "We let them scare us for too long." He stood up. "We owe him thanks." Then, something no one predicted. A motion was filed by members of the HOA to dissolve the current board. They needed 51% approval. They got 73%. 3 days later, the HOA president resigned. No apology, no press conference. Just a bitter email claiming she was the victim of political bullying. Her vice president followed, so did the treasurer. The whole system collapsed like rotten wood, and in the ashes, something new began. The first time I stepped onto the dock after the storm, the air felt different. Not lighter, not calmer, but clearer. It was dusk. Fog kissed the lake. Ripples broke softly under the moonlight. Behind me, footsteps approached. It was Lisa. She stood silently beside me for a moment before speaking. "You were right all along." "I wasn't trying to be," I said. "I just didn't want to be lied to." She pulled something from her coat. A bottle of old bourbon. 2 glasses. We sat on the edge of the dock, pouring slow, listening to the silence. "I heard you used to work for the government," she said eventually. I nodded. She smiled faintly. "Makes sense?" Weeks passed. The HOA restructured, this time democratically. No secret meetings. No unchecked power. They shrunk their role down to trash collection and road maintenance. Declared private property with written boundaries. My boundaries: that the signs came down, the flags disappeared, even the security. SUVs stopped showing up. People began waving again. Not everyone. Some still avoided me, still whispered. But most came around. Kids fished off their own backyard docks again. Neighbors stopped by with cookies, questions, curiosity. I wasn't feared anymore. I was respected. Then came the final moment. A folded letter in my mailbox. No stamp, No return address, just scrawled handwriting. You taught us something. The real power doesn't come from clipboards or bylaws, it comes from the truth. I hope you can forgive us. A former believer, I folded. It gently placed it in a drawer, and for the first time since I moved in, I exhaled. They stormed in when I first arrived. 3 people with smug faces and fake power. They tried to shake me, frame me, scare me, isolate me. But they didn't know I didn't need a neighborhood to feel at home. They didn't know this. Wasn't my first fight. They didn't know that while they were drawing up fake claims, I was drawing boundaries they could never cross again, because I didn't just own the lake, I owned the truth, and in the end, it was enough to drown them all.